that's really all that we have really is the alumni thing and then the ordinance stuff.
Saturday, I got Sunday morning off. I know it.
Good morning and welcome to the City of Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for February 8th, 2018. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda, there are speaker request forms on the table along the left wall. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff seated on the left of the dais. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. Consent calendar. Items 1 and 2 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the City Council. The City Council will make the final decision. Are there any items 1 or 2 that staff would like removed? Any items 1 or 2 that planning commission would like removed? And would the audience like to remove either item 1 or 2? Galen made the motion to approve items 1 and 2 per staff's recommendations, and Mike seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3.
Morning. Item number 3 is 17 RZ040. This was continued from the January 25th Planning Commission meeting at the applicant's request. The applicant has since submitted a preliminary site report, which staff has not had time to review, and so in order to give staff and the public and everyone the time to review that and see if it meets the needs of what we're looking for, staff is recommending that the rezoning request be continued to the February 22nd meeting.
Galen made the motion to continue this item till February 22nd. Second. Rachel seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr.
Mike?
The parties that have been affected, or they've been contacted, I'm assuming?
Mr. Chair.
Vicki?
Thank you, Mike. That's exactly what I wanted to add too, is that we did put those that attended the last meeting and were in the audience on notice that they should call us to see if the information did come in, and if staff had time to look at it. They identified that they wanted to look at it as well. So we have been in contact with those key neighborhood individuals. They are aware that our recommendation was to continue it. I would anticipate that at your next meeting, there'll be several from the neighborhood in attendance.
Thank you. The motion on the floor is to continue. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4.
Chairman, could we take item number 4 and 5 concurrently?
Sure.
These two items, it's a final plan development overlay to allow an alumni center and an associated rezoning request to change the land use designation from high-density residential district to office commercial district. This property located adjacent to the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology campus, owned by the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology Foundation, and it'll be the future location of their alumni center and offices. Property is located on the northwest corner of East Kansas City Street and Birch Avenue, zoned high-density residential district. Property to the north and west is also zoned that, and to the east and south, it's Park Forest District. Just so you're aware, also on the agenda today are ordinance amendments for the new urban commercial district, and this property is within that boundary of that future urban commercial district. The rezoning request is so that they can get the offices and alumni center, which would be allowed in the office commercial district at this time until the urban commercial district is adopted, and then a future rezoning comes forward for that. Currently, the property is developed with residential structures which are being rented out. To the north, we have the Rocker Square Apartments. To the west, the Newman Center, and then to the east, the Mines Campus, and I believe the Surbeck Center and other facilities. The future land use is mixed-use commercial, with East St. Joseph Street being identified as a revitalization corridor. The office commercial district does fit in the mixed-use commercial district, and the proposed project is the kind of project we're looking for in a mixed-use or in a revitalization corridor. East St. Joe and East Main are also identified as principal arterial streets, and here you can see where it's located in that downtown area on what is the eastern boundary of that future urban commercial district, which is the connection between the School of Mines and the Central Business District. The applicant is requesting 4 exceptions. First exception is to reduce the minimum required parking from 100 parking spaces to 14 parking spaces. The applicant has submitted a detailed operations plan identifying that they'll be in compliance with not only the future urban commercial district, but that they are also working with the Newman Center on a parking agreement. There'll be on-street parking and using the Surbeck Center parking for events at the Alumni Center, and also that the office use and the assembly area use would be at different times. So the office is 9 to 5, and the assembly area would be used on either evenings or weekends, so they wouldn't be conflicting. They've indicated that the parking that is available that they are proposing will meet the needs for the office use. It's also consolidating their alumni center and the offices into one central location near the campus. The second exception is to reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 25 feet to 9 feet along the east property line, and then from the next one being from 25 to 20 feet along the south property line from East Kansas City Street. The proposed exception requests meet the intent of what the mixed-use commercial district promotes, as well as what the future urban commercial district, which will come in the future, promotes, which is reducing that front yard setback and creating a more pedestrian-oriented development. The applicant, in keeping with what the future zoning will be, has included a lot of the design standards, which Sarah will go through when she gets up to that presentation. They've incorporated a lot of those details which aren't required at this time, but will be pretty much one of those first projects that we'll see how this urban commercial district will work. The third exception, or the last exception, is to waive the screening requirement along the north and west lot lines as from the office commercial district if it's adjacent to a residential district, a 5 to 6 foot high opaque screening fence would be required along the property lines. That's not what's intended in the future urban commercial district. It's promoting that mixed use and that being able to have those uses compatible and together, and the fact that it's the Newman Center, another use next door, and apartments, and this is the Alumni Center, it should all meld together. In addition, there's a bike path that's developed, wrong screen, along the vacated alley, which is another one of those connections we're promoting between downtown and the School of Mines. Floor plan, offices, and as I said, an assembly area for alumni events. Proposed landscaping plan, it's really putting landscaping along the streets and pedestrian areas to make those more inviting, more pedestrian friendly. In addition to having the parking and on-street parking, they're going to be providing bike racks along these areas to promote alternative forms of transportation. Architectural elevation of the proposed building, and then a good one we see here, a couple of the keys that are promoted by the urban commercial district is the change in facade, so we have different types of material being used, windows, promoting more window space on that ground floor level, and promoting more pedestrian-oriented spaces so that it meets with what the mixed-use commercial district and the downtown master plan and comprehensive plan and the mixed-use commercial district all support and promote. Here we have looking into the site from Birch, looking west, or no, sorry, from East Kansas City looking south. That's Rocker Square, one of the apartment buildings on the adjacent property, and there you can see the existing residential structures located. Looking towards the Newman Center and the second Rocker Square Tower, and along Kansas City Street. And then there's a hill to the south, which is avoids any structural development, and then looking towards campus to the east. And the existing parking, this parking will go away, and it'll become 3 spots along the street, parallel parking. The great thing about the urban commercial district is that off-street parking like those spots will count towards, or on-street parking will count towards the parking requirement. This is looking into the site from on campus, and you can see that the signs are posted on the property, and then looking towards St. Joseph Street, and again looking towards the south at that the hill side. Staff is excited about this project coming forward, and also looking forward to seeing how it will fit with that urban commercial district. With that, staff is recommending that the plan development be approved and that the rezoning request be approved. Are there any questions for staff? The applicant and consultants are available in the audience if there are any specific questions.
Thanks, Fletcher. John?
The 9-foot setback is from property line. So what is the net setback from the curb?
I don't have that calculation.
Pretty sizable in that area.
What's that?
It's pretty sizable in that area.
So are we going to, once we set this precedence to 9 feet, are you going to hold that down the road?
The future urban commercial district supports a 0 to 10 foot setback. So anywhere within 0 feet of the property line and 10 feet, we're promoting moving the buildings closer to the street rather than further back.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Vicki.
if I might, Sarah will explain a lot of this, and maybe we should have reversed the order on the agenda, but when the urban commercial district comes forward, and again, that's to connect our downtown area with the School of Mines, and we've got 2 streets identified as pedestrian streets where we want to encourage that activity, folks walking, having an opportunity to sit in a courtyard of sorts along a commercial or residential building. And in that district, there's a maximum setback. This will be the first time we've approached setbacks from that angle, but there will be a maximum setback allowed of 10 feet. So the 9-foot is almost too much, but it does fit within that 10-foot maximum. So you're going to see more and more of these as development comes in. So John, it's a good question in that it's an acknowledgement that as we see this work on this site with that 9-foot area used to promote that pedestrian-friendly atmosphere, this will be continued as we see redevelopment and new development farther to the west.
Mike?
I guess I just have a little question again on parking. That area just south of the Newman parking, it looks like it's an area that could be developed. Is there a plan for that? Or I know that when things happen at I think it's a great plan. I like the idea of having this here. I'm concerned, though, when it gets busy down there. I've been to some of the events at the School of Mines, and sometimes the parking gets crazy. And so I don't know what events they're going to have at this center that they're developing, but is there an opportunity for some more parking? And then does the agreement with the Newman Center need to be before this? I mean, should it all be or already be in place?
I'd like the applicant to address those questions. We had the applicant address it through the letter of intent, and so taking it on their operations plan. So in order to get better information on that, the specifics, we'll have the applicant answer. Which one did you want?
The overhead photo?
The site plan
Satellite view,
or the satellite?
like that?
Bob Morgan with TSP and Joe Kinkart, president of the foundation. I think to best explain the operation, it'd be good to have Joel just go through sort of the normal operation of the facility and then how special events and activities are handled after that.
We're anticipating events that we'd host during the day would be events that are already going on campus, like the career fair, so we're not bringing additional people during the day when parking's already at its peak. It's more to alleviate space needs that we have in the regular operation of the university. Special events, alumni gatherings, activities like that would be in the evening when parking is more available on campus. We have a shared use agreement with the parking on the Surbeck Center side to handle that, as well as the Newman Center to handle the evening parking. So we're mostly looking for that extra activity at night when campus activity is lower.
So you already have the agreement with the Newman Center?
We have a verbal agreement on that. We have a, it's verbal, right, at this point? Yeah. We did written agreements for drainage and some other easements, but it was verbal just for the parking at night.
Okay, then the question I had was that just south of the Newman parking, it looks like there's an open space there. That could not be developed into parking, or is there a plan for that, or?
There is no plan for that at that time. I don't know if that's even land that we have.
Yeah, I don't think we have the access to that land down there, so that'd be a different process.
Is it an option?
Sure it is, and that everything's an option, right? But
I gotcha.
how viable it would be, I don't know. We haven't explored that.
Well, you've kind of cornered the market down there, and I like what you've done. I think it's a great fit, and I think what you have planned here is good. I just see opportunity that if we plan the parking a little better, we could get some more and solve some problems down the road.
Okay.
I guess I'd just like to interject. I have a little history down in this corner professionally. In that hillside, there's a lot of fear of sliding soils, and so there is not much interest in doing anything with that vacant land. I'm pretty sure the school owns up to the apartments on the south side of Kansas City.
I'm sorry, I actually was talking north of the parking there, that small area.
Oh, that's the drainage for the Newman Center.
Okay.
That's the stormwater retention and metering. And that was actually a question of mine. Do you have some sort of agreement to share that? Because I don't see a retention pond on this property.
Yes, and that's one of the advantages for the location of the property. We have an agreement shared and a maintenance agreement tied with the Newman Center, And the detention pond there has the capacities for both sites, and we've done a study for that and presented that. So.
That's great. That's a really good thing. It helps use the whole property instead of having to devote part of 2 properties to that. Mike, I'm sorry I interrupted. Okay.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Thanks. I was.
Rachel.
This is a question for staff. So as far as parking goes, when this becomes, assuming the ordinance amendment passes, and this becomes an urban commercial district, it's going to be within the requirements for the urban commercial district parking, right? This is only kind of a formality to get us until that's actually in effect?
That is correct. The office commercial district requires parking be provided at 5 per thousand for office use and 25 per thousand for assembly. So this operational plan was pivotal in staff being able to support the exception to allow the 14 spaces to meet the parking requirements for this structure, regardless of the zoning. In urban commercial, they will be required to provide 2 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. The on-street parking adjacent to the property counts towards the parking requirement. Bike racks can defer some of the parking requirement as well. And then with that lesser calculation, it does bring them into compliance with the urban commercial district. Of course, that operation where assemblies in the evenings is really the only way this site works.
Okay, thank you.
Justin?
I just need to abstain from voting on this one.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on these 2 items? Who was the second? Mike? Karen made the motion to approve items 4 and 5 with staff stipulations. Mike Kwasny seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries with Justin abstaining. Item number 6.
Good morning, Sarah Hansel, Long Range Planning. Excuse me. Item number 6 is an ordinance to create a new zoning district, the Urban Commercial District. A large group of city staff and the community at large have been working on this for over a year since the adoption of the Downtown Area Master Plan. There are currently 24 districts in the zoning code for Rapid City, and passing this ordinance will then make number 25. I just want to point out that the items on the agenda today are just to create the district and to bring associated ordinance amendments forward to revise the code. At the next Planning Commission on February 22nd, you'll see 3 rezoning applications to actually make the action to rezone. We phased it this way in case there were any questions or any snags along the way. We just wanted to make sure that we hadn't already initiated the notice process to property owners and that such. So that's why we're doing it this way. We're bringing the amendments forward, and then the rezoning process itself will come next. So with that, I'd just like to go through a brief presentation. Just to kind of highlight some of the contents of this ordinance. We have reviewed it, and I will also point out some of the changes, the small changes that have been made since the Planning Commission work session on January 3rd. So as I mentioned, this is part of implementation of the Downtown Master Plan. That plan, as well as the comprehensive plan, is really calling for mixed use and infill development, more variety in the housing types that we're seeing downtown, and an environment that's supportive of the innovation and creative economy niche that we're seeing more development and more demand for, as part of our desire to connect to the School of Mines and to create a comfortable, walkable downtown environment that feels like a cohesive place all the way from the School of Mines to the historic core. So that's really our goal for this ordinance, is to help encourage development that really fits in with that. Quick primer on the public outreach that's gone behind this ordinance. We've vetted this through a wide group of people. It's been created through the input of several. As I mentioned, a great team of city staff has been working on this. We've been meeting regularly. There's been an advisory committee that we've met with throughout. We've had designer and developer consultant focus groups and a series of open houses where property owners were noticed. We've had 3 open houses in the course of the last year that we've been working on this. And we also talked about this project as well at one of our recent Coffee with a Planners event. We've had great reactions to the information in this ordinance, and there's a lot of people in the community really looking forward to seeing this come forward. This is a map of the downtown area in general, showing the existing zoning districts. Take you one slide forward here in the sort of magenta color, you can see the boundary of the proposed district. Nothing today is actually solidifying this boundary, but just so you kind of have a general sense of where this is looking at, it's generally east of mostly 4th Street. There's one lot there, the AB's Feed and Seed complex, that's west of 4th Street, over towards the School of Mines. This is about 50 acres of property. The train tracks form the northern boundary, and then St. Joseph Street and Kansas City Street form the boundary to the south. The uses section of this district is largely based on what's currently allowed in the Central Business District and the General Commercial District. We did create some new definitions for different housing types, as well as some uses that will fit in with that kind of innovation district concept. So you'll notice those in the use table. We're presenting the uses in this district a little bit differently. We've put them in alphabetical order and have put them in a table format instead. So we're kind of using this district as a way to test that out, and maybe looking forward to looking at how this might fit into other districts in the future for our zoning code. Substantial portion of the district, then, what I want to talk about next are the development standards. So these are the standards that are shaping the character of physical development. First, I'll draw your attention to the chart in green. Those are the area regulations. This chart is comparing the 3 existing zoning districts in the area. We have the Central Business District, the General Commercial District, and the Medium Density Residential District. And you can see how setbacks and lot coverage and the parking requirements, as well as the height, varies from district to district. Overall, in the Urban Commercial District, we're really increasing the potential for development density by increasing the height limit from the General Commercial District, reducing the setbacks, and increasing the maximum lot coverage. And I will go into parking in just a little bit more detail, but what you'll notice there, and as was discussed for the last item on the agenda, the parking requirements in this district are 2 per 1,000. It's just a sort of a blanket requirement for any commercial use. And then the amount for residential uses are kind of based on what type of housing. Is it new housing where we're building up from scratch? Or are we taking an existing building and finding a higher and better use for it and sort of converting it? For those conversion properties, there may be more site constraints. So the parking requirement for residential conversions are just a little bit lower. And then to the pedestrian-oriented development, these are the design standards, if you will, that are going to help make this district more walkable. For each development where these standards apply, there are 4 required design standards, and those are for ground floor windows at a 45% coverage, building face variation, which is that sort of change in facade material that Fletcher was illustrating with the elevation for the SD Mines Alumni Center, the location of the main entrance and requiring it to be facing the street, and then pedestrian scale lighting. And that's one of those topics that came up at the Planning Commission work session. There was some discussion about the importance for that lighting being on every project. So that used to be in the next list down, that used to be sort of the pick 2 option, and we've moved that up to one of the required elements. And then so those 4 are required, and then there's a list of 7 or more things that each developer can kind of decide what will work best for them in terms of having additional ground floor windows, an outdoor seating area, bike racks, landscaping features, or other art and design elements. So what we hope that this does is kind of creates a consistent feel. It's going to establish a pedestrian-oriented place, but also leave enough sort of flexibility into the process for people to look at their property individually and figure out something that will work well for them. And then on to parking standards. The green chart is showing some common types of uses that we see in commercial districts, banks, restaurants, lounges, hotels, offices, supermarkets, these types of things. and comparing them to the 2 per thousand. And what we see is anywhere from a 50 to 80% reduction in the parking requirement. And this is then consistent with the downtown master plan recommending that the requirements for parking in this area be 35% of what's required. So this is kind of the sort of a building on that idea a little bit, still requiring parking in this area, but substantially reducing it in order to reduce barriers to redevelopment. And there are also some parking lot design standards, so if on-site parking is provided on a site, then we're interested in how it fits in with the site layout to see the parking lots located to the side of the building or behind it preferably, and minimizing the amount of parking lot that is facing the street. So there's a 25% maximum lot frontage that's part of this district. And then lastly, applicability. You know, the intent for this area is to really encourage new uses, to encourage innovation, to encourage new businesses to form and start. So we took a look at, you know, when are these standards going to come into play? All new uses will be required to fit in with the uses that are allowed in this district, and all new construction will be required to follow these regulations. But then for existing structures and facade renovation, there's a 40% sort of cap. So once you increase your square footage by 40% cumulatively over time, or once you change your facade materials by 40% or more, that's when you're making a substantial investment in the property, and it's a good time to come into compliance, given the vast amount of changes that are being made. And that's another change from the work session, the facade renovation. We've added that in since our work session in January as well. With that, I'd just like to leave any time for questions or comments, and I will just say that we're looking forward to bringing this forward, and we do recommend that this ordinance amendment be approved.
Thanks, Sarah. John?
So the height maximum is 100 feet or 8 stories?
That's correct.
Do we have the firefighting capability for 100 feet?
Good morning. Yes, we actually do, and really the building provisions begin to take care of that component for us in the taller buildings. When you get into a high-rise type structure, the building construction requirements, the fire protection features that are employed in those buildings really begin to take care of that. So the height really does not become a problem for us, whether it was 8, 10, 12, or 20. So, but great question. Thanks.
Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Sarah, I want to say that I think this process has worked really well. I'm impressed the fact that we're creating a whole new zoning district, and there's so many things that you need to take a look at and minute little details and stuff. So I think this is going to be a great way to blend downtown with the School of Mines and just get that whole development going in that area. Going through these things, and I did go through last night again, and so I have a couple little things that I wanted to bring out. In the ordinance on page 7, when it talks about parking, that first item, 1A, when I read that, I went, what? I didn't understand how it was because it says dwelling units and then 1-bedroom dwelling unit and additional, etc. I think the word unit after bedroom on that one should take the word unit out of there, because it's not a unit, it's the bedroom itself. You see what I'm saying? It's on that second line.
Mm-hmm. On part 1A you're referring to?
Correct. 1A, it says new construction of residential dwelling units shall provide one space for 1-bedroom unit, and I think you meant just 1 bedroom and an additional half space for each additional bedroom, because we're talking about just the bedrooms, not the dwelling unit itself. Does that make sense?
Sure. So an apartment that has 1 bedroom in it would be,
Right.
Yeah, it would be. So we're referring to the apartment unit.
Yeah.
And then,
but then you just need
Or
1 bedroom in
a
every
one.
additional bedroom, not the unit itself.
okay.
So I would take the word unit off of that. And I'll show you afterwards if
Okay.
that makes more sense. It's kind of hard to just look at it first, because when I first looked at it, I went, what? It didn't make sense to me.
Okay.
And then on page 12, we're going through the conditional uses that are there for the multifamily units.
Mm-hmm.
My question really isn't anything about how it's written, but when I read most of the other things, there's things that you have to do. You have to have this and this within a conditional use permit. And this one, it just says that they shall deliver active ground floor uses and encourage interaction through such means as, and that lists 5 different things there. Does that mean they can do one of those or 2 of those? There's not a requirement that they have to do all of those, correct?
Yeah, there's such a variety in how the design of a residential unit could be treated. We really wanted to make it clear from an intent standpoint that that interaction at the street edge is really important and kind of give some future direction to what that could look like, but not kind of over design it before we're looking at a site-specific context. So it is, there's a lot of flexibility in what that could look like.
So if they decided not to do any of those things, it still is a possibility it could go forward.
I think if you made a strong enough argument that there's interaction at the street edge and you use some other means, then that would be looked at.
Okay. I didn't see anything that requires them to do some of those things, and a lot of times it says you do 1 or 2, or it's an optional thing. Is that what you're saying? Okay. That's the only questions I had, and other than that, it looked pretty good. So
there is some housing guidance in our downtown master plan too. So if we're looking at a development, we can look to that for guidance as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki.
For applicability of this ordinance, we need to give specific direction to the public. And I think the chart that Sarah showed earlier where you get to, here's the 4 elements you have to meet, here's the others that you select 2, and at the end of the day, the goal is to achieve some of these components that are presented on page 12, but the specifics as to what we can look at and require are set forth in a different part of the ordinance. It's a great conversation, Karen, and we probably will look at the specific wording of that to make sure that we've clarified what criteria has to be met and what we're trying to secure for goals as a part of that criteria. Thank you. Good catch.
I don't have any other lights up, so I'm just going to jump in. I really appreciate the overall intent of this. I'm happy to have it coming forward. One thing that I don't agree with, but I'm not going to hold up today with an argument over, is regulating the setbacks based on height. I think stepping back a building 10 feet, I think, at the 3rd story, the benefit is limited to the public in general, and it creates construction issues, space use issues. I think any developer would be smart to vary their facade and provide an interesting looking building, but I don't see the benefit of requiring it as a city. And that said, I can't imagine we're going to have a ton of these applications coming in next week for something over 3 stories. So I don't want to hold up the cart for a small argument. Any further questions or comments? Karen made the motion to approve item 6, the ordinance amendment to Title 17 to add the urban commercial district. Rachel seconded that motion. Galen.
Would it make sense to approve all of these at the same time, or do we need to take these one at a time?
So we have item 6 by itself on the agenda, and then I was just about to recommend that we take item 7 through 15 as a group.
Sounds good. So the motion on the floor is to approve item 6. Is there further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7.
Okay, so items number 7 through 15 are a group of associated ordinance amendments that are necessary in order to implement the provisions within the urban commercial district. They are listed up here. If you do have any questions about them, please let us know. Basically, these are, creating definitions, cleaning up different sections of the code to refer to the urban commercial district. In some instances, for example, landscaping and parking, those ordinance amendments are allowing the sort of break from what we do other places in the code to have sort of specific scenarios for the urban commercial district, so we really need those ordinance amendments in order to bring this urban district all the way through. They're pretty straightforward amendments, though, so with that, we would recommend that 18-OA-002 through 18-OA-010 be approved, but we can take any questions you may have.
I don't have any problems, certainly, on taking 7 through 15 together. Do any of the rest of the commissioners have any issue with that? Okay. Any, Rachel?
So I just have a couple of questions, and they're nothing too big. I've noticed this language, and it's not new language, but it's on 18-OA-004. It's in the code 1750-050, and it's this plan development overlay district. And the language is something that I don't understand, so I was just wondering if you could clarify it for me. It says the plan development overlay shall replace the following plan development ordinance designations in effect prior to May 11, 2012. And then it goes into PDD, PUD, and all those. Does that mean that any projects that were approved under those designations prior to May 11th, 2012 are going to have this new designation, or does that actually replace those designations? Does that make any sense?
So I think maybe Carla, would you be willing to take this one?
Sure.
Okay.
The language that you're talking about, Rachel, is currently in the ordinance, and we're not really changing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think previous to May 11th, 2012, there were a whole bunch of different options for different types of plan developments, and the ordinance, when it was adopted in 2012, kind of consolidated those into just one plan development overlay.
Okay.
So this wouldn't really change that. The change to this ordinance is allowing administrative dissolution of plan developments, because we anticipate, and Vicki can speak to this too, there's a lot of plan developments in this area related to parking and other things. And we anticipate that once we rezone them to the urban commercial district, the need for that plan development will no longer be present, and we can administratively dissolve them. So that was not really a mechanism that was, the ordinance amendment we drafted will make that easier to accomplish.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is about the landscape requirements. So this is item number 18-OA-008, and it's section G, general requirements, and then the subsection E underneath that. And it's just about fruit-bearing trees being located within, areas of traffic for pedestrians or vehicles. And I understand the requirement for this. And I understand that this is a maintenance issue. You want to make sure you don't have rotten apples on the sidewalk and things like that. But I'm also thinking about it from a perspective of food insecurity in Rapid City, about the lack of access to produce for some people, and then as well as if we have restaurants that come in who say, I want to grow my own limes or something like that in a little pot, I'm wondering if we could maybe have some language in there that allows it as long as it's maintained on a daily basis or picked up after or something like that, if that's something that you guys would think might actually work out.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicki.
So that language is actually in the landscape regulations right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just placing those fruit-bearing trees over right-of-way, whether it be the sidewalk or the parking area. But if you choose to have a fruit-bearing tree on your property that doesn't drop produce onto the sidewalk, then you can certainly do it. In fact, as a part of what we would consider landscaping points, we talked about boxed gardens and rooftop gardens and how those could count. So this ordinance is actually expanding the area that these types of uses could be allowed. I think, though, in visiting with Public Works staff and the maintenance of the streets and the sidewalks, they'll hold firm that they're on board with us being very flexible in what vegetation counts towards landscape points, however, not over the sidewalks or parked cars. And most developers don't want it either, because it becomes an issue with their customers and their employees when you have to constantly maintain that.
Okay, so it could be hypothetically like adjacent to a sidewalk. It just can't be right above a sidewalk or a car.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments, thoughts on this? Seeing none, I'd look for a motion on items 7 through 15. Galen made the motion to approve items 7 through 15 per staff's recommendations. Is there a second? Rachel seconded that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Sarah. I know this is a lot of work. Discussion items, staff items today?
Just one, actually two. I'd like to thank those planning commissioners that did make it to yesterday's Coffee with Planners. We had our second one. It was well attended again with great audience participation. If you haven't had an opportunity to attend one, we encourage you to do so. Your input is greatly appreciated at those meetings. We'll let you know far in advance when our next one's going to be. It's in May. And lastly, want to put you on notice that Kurt Hughes is the liaison for City Council at the next City Council meeting, and remind you that if you can't attend, it's your responsibility to find a replacement. In the future, what we've decided to do is that under Planning Commission items on this agenda, we will actually note the planning commissioner who is on duty to be the liaison, so that you have it in written form and gives you a little bit more time if you can't make it to find a replacement.
Sounds good. Thank you. Mike?
I wanted to bring up, I enjoyed the Coffee with Planner, and I think it's a great opportunity to communicate with developers in our community and the public in general. There were some interesting comments, and I think sometimes we get stuck with what our thoughts are, and we don't necessarily hear everybody's thoughts. So I thought it was real interesting to go to. So I would recommend any of us that are able to just kind of listen and hear what the public's saying. I did have a comment during that. They talked about traffic counts, and I think Ken's addressed this before in his past meetings, where we need to look at secondary exits from areas of our town and making primary roads having more than one road. We've developed some of our high traffic counts that came up in that meeting, and I think we need to keep that on the top of our mind on how to adjust some of the traffic in our community so that we can take care of those high traffic counts, and not necessarily with a wider road, but maybe alternative exits and entrances. So I think Ken's got that on his scope. I've heard him talk about it before, and so I can appreciate that. So, but I really enjoyed that Coffee with the Planners, and I think it's a great thing to have.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Ken.
Oh, I just thought I'd add, our plan for the next go-around for Coffee with Planners in May is we'll change up the format a little bit, and I think they may have introduced the idea yesterday. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend, but we're going to set up tables that will be topic-specific, so that we'll have all the planners representing a different issue of planning that we're talking about, and then we'll have rotation on about 10 minutes each or whatever at each table, so that you can come in and learn about several different things in a smaller group setting, and then switch around. So it'll be a little bit more intimate to get to know your planner type of a thing while drinking coffee. So that will be our goal for next time. So we'd love to have your participation if you would like to actually participate at one of the tables on a topic that you're interested in, so that you can also represent your ideas as a commissioner.
Thank you. Karen?
Thank you. Two of the topics that were talked about yesterday were that I was interested in was the office commercial, to take out that MDR status, and I think that's a great idea. I know a lot of people who have had moved in or had property next to office commercial, thinking there's going to be a office there, and all of a sudden the apartment goes up. They're not happy about it. So I think that's well worth pursuing. And the other topic was one that Fletcher brought up, or somebody brought up, about the space between like a 3-4-story apartment building right next to residential areas, and the space that's there, and I like that idea, to work on that, get space there, or do something different, because those large apartments tower over the residential areas, and somebody who has a home already there is all of a sudden looking at a balcony, and people are obviously upset by that. And over the years, I've talked to a number of people who are very upset with, not so much with the apartment itself, it's just the balconies and the fact that the light is cut off sometimes, you know, the shadows and that kind of thing. And it's just a separation thing of, you know, they just need back off a little bit. And so I'd like to see that pursued somehow and at least looked at. So those are the two things that I really liked about yesterday's meeting. So that's it. Thanks.
Mr. Chair?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah.
Just in full disclosure, interestingly enough, there were a couple in the audience that didn't agree with that concept at all. Fletcher had gone out and taken pictures of some existing apartments that look out onto existing single-family residential lots, and they showed the third story with decks that would now overlook into these backyards. And we had one individual in the audience who's lived in large cities, and she believes that our separation is more than it should be, that we need to increase density, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way the world lives these days, and increasing it is costly to the developers and is going to make lower densities, et cetera. And a couple others wanted to jump on that bandwagon. So I would assume that when this comes forward, we will continue to listen to all sides of the argument. When we present our recommendation, we will validate it to the best of our ability so that you can make the right decision.
Thanks, Vicki. Mike, I've got you up again.
I guess one final comment on that very thing. I think there were some great comments on that part about the housing being too close and whether it should be or not. I was really pleased to hear developers that have thought that through, and they're actually trying to figure out how to fix that problem before it becomes something, and whether it's putting garages in spots that make that separation. I think it's great when we can get the developers involved and they want to make that happen. There's options that we sometimes don't think of, and I think it was a great way that the developer, and one in particular, brought up how he fixed that problem. So.
All right. Anybody else? Comments? Look for a motion to adjourn then. Galen made the motion. Oh, Mike made the motion. Mike and Galen seconded it. All those in favor of adjourn, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?